and welcome to Relationship Helpers. I'm your host, Laura Ketchy, and I'm joined with Vincent, my husband.
Hello, how are you doing?
Early in our marriage, I was a terror. I was struggling with adjusting to my new living arrangement with someone who I was still getting to know, and I was trying to cope with some pretty severe post-traumatic stress disorder. There were times where I would be home depressed and I would call Vincent at work. You remember those days?
Yes, you did.
I would get frustrated.
I would get frustrated.
He didn't make it better. And I really do shudder at the thought that one time when I made one of these calls, I threw my phone down on the ground outside. And when I look back at that time, I can pretty much dissect the situation and understand where the breakdown occurred. But in that moment, I was an emotional mess. Years of therapy would help me to see where my thinking was fault and how to fix it. Now that I'm a therapist, this thing has really come full circle. As therapists, we have come to expect an influx of new clients after Valentine's Day, don't we, Benny?
Yeah, many times.
Without fail, one or both spouses are disappointed in the outcome of their Valentine's experience. And the root of the issue really isn't what was or wasn't done that day, but an unspoken expectation that was not met. As a married couple and as therapists, we've learned that this thing called marriage requires being direct, communicative. It's going to take a lot more time for your spouse to get to know you if you expect him to read your mind.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to know what they want unless you really sit down and have some conversations.
So that's what we're going to tackle today. We're going to talk about 5 different mistakes that we as a couple can make that can lead to disappointment and how to fix those things.
Right, yeah. I mean, I guess you could figure out what someone else was thinking if you read their diary, but I would not advise that. This would be much healthier, actually talking to them.
And we're not talking about secretive behavior here. We're actually talking about healthy communication.
Right.
And that's going to be really the foundation of our discussion today. So, without further ado, let's take a look of the 5 mistakes that can be made and what we can do to fix them. We're going to start first with what we just said, having unspoken expectations. I'm going to throw a question out to you. Whose fault is it really if your spouse does not do what you want him to do if you don't tell him?
So who is responsible for their thoughts?
Exactly. So once you acknowledge that you've not fully voiced your expectation, let them know your expectation and give them grace for not knowing it to begin with.
Right, and this isn't that you're just kind of putting hints out there. I think some people may talk out loud, put hints like, hey, I enjoy that TV show, or I don't know, they just may be watching commercials, and these commercials are influencing what they're thinking, or they're hearing something on the radio about what this couple has done, and they're getting in their mind something that maybe they haven't really expressed that they want.
Tell me more.
Oh, well, I don't know. Well, they could, of course, during this time, there's these, with the commercials, you're always seeing the perfect couple, or at least the perfect person or spouse.
You mean the storybook?
The storybook, doing something very romantic where they've really thought it out well, and the other person is surprised and they enjoy it. But, of course, they're all acting because that's what they're paid for. They're acting in a commercial, right? They're paid to sell you something. But I think sometimes we see that, or, let's say you're not seeing commercials, but you may be reading it or seeing this on Facebook or some other social media where you're seeing one of your friends has gotten this for their Valentine's Day or this for their birthday or whatever it may be.
So you're basically seeing the highlight reel of a person's life via social media, and so many people will take that highlight reel to be the actual reality of that person's life.
I think a lot of people will, I don't know, is the word generalization, or yes, they'll take that and they will generalize it or apply it to their private life or their other times that this couple is spending together, instead of what that Facebook, or even, I say Facebook, it could be like even like their church or public display is maybe a lot different than their private display of affection, love, and romance. Because I know there's some couples, they look like they're in love, or they present that at
that
image at social functions, church, parties, with coworkers or wherever it may be. But in actuality, that's not.
They get behind closed doors and they can be beating each other up.
Right. That's not the truth.
Or they're tearing each other down verbally.
Right. So we get a lot of these, or people will start having these unspoken expectations that are built upon maybe, I would say, lies or just distortions of really the truth.
Be careful what you wish for.
Mm-hmm.
Because, if you think about that example of a couple that seems so perfect out in public, but behind closed doors are abusive, and, imagine someone that is kind of coveting that relationship because they see this public image, but they don't really know what's really going on with that couple.
Right.
Okay. Let's take a look at the next mistake, which is really kind of piggybacking on the first, and that's expecting your spouse to read your mind. I call this a little bit different than the first one just because, well, let me just put it this way. I have noticed with couples, and a lot of times this happens with women, they will feel that their husband should know exactly how they're feeling, even if they don't say how they're feeling. Let me explain. So there's this kind of magical thinking that people have. Their spouse should know how they feel.
Right. Well, they set them up for failure. And what I mean is they're like, well, if you loved me, then you would know what I want and you would provide that for me.
Or so if you love me, you know what I feel.
Yes, you would know me. If you love me, you would know me. You would know how I feel, know what I think. And so you would do ...
Which, in essence, and okay, I'm getting ready to get kind of clinical on you here, but that's codependency. That's saying that another person is responsible for how you feel to a certain degree. I'm using that definition loosely. Or maybe should fulfill that,
but it's definitely that mind reading. I can think in session when I mention this to my clients, I hear them say, "Oh, so you're thinking what they're thinking. You're telling me what they're thinking, but you don't know that's what they think."
Right.
You think they're thinking about you, thinking about getting you something and doing this with you, and you don't know that that's not what they're actually thinking. You're mind reading them, and then since you're mind reading them, and sometimes you get it right, but many times maybe you're not even getting it right. Many times you're wrong. You don't realize you're wrong in reading their mind. You think that's what they want to do, but maybe that's not really what they want to do, but they just never tell you any different.
Oh, so it snowballs into something completely off from what it originally was.
No, well, my point is that I'll get a person here, and they're doing mind reading on this other person. And they have this wrong attitude of them because they've been reading their mind wrong. For instance, let's say they're seeing like a couple of people talking over there and they're laughing and giggling. Well, a person maybe who's got a negative view of themselves are thinking that, hey, they're making fun of me. When really that's not the case. Maybe they were just telling a joke or talking about something they saw on TV that was funny. All right, so this person's mind reading. They're assuming they know what the other people are talking about. They think that about those two people. Let's say they do the opposite as well. They may come home to their spouse and assume, hey, I'm good at mind reading other people. I know that they're making fun of me when they're actually wrong. And then they're thinking, hey, my spouse should be doing the same thing as what I do to these other people.
I think
does that make sense?
Yes, it
does.
They
think that the spouse should be knowing what they're thinking because obviously at work or at whatever, they know what these other people are thinking.
Wow, and
when none of it's true.
You've really brought up a good point, and it's kind of the lie of anxiety and the lie of depression, which is I'm good at knowing what other people think. That's
when they're really not.
Yeah, that's something I see with individuals that struggle a lot with anxiety and depression is their belief, and I'm going to call that magical thinking again, that they're good at knowing what other people think.
Right.
And it's really judgment is what it is. It's judging.
It's judging, and really they're just bad communicators.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really poor communication.
That's right. That's right. Okay, let's take a look at another mistake that can be made that can lead to disappointment in your spouse. And this is a huge one. And we could probably do several podcast episodes on this topic, which is using the wrong love language. So, here's the deal about love languages. I highly encourage everyone, if you've never read The 5 Love Languages by Dr. Gary Chapman, get that book. You're going to get, you can find it anywhere. It's a national bestseller, and it's been so for years. In the book, you will also find a quiz that will basically help you identify which of the 5 love languages you have or you use. So I'd highly recommend that.
Right, and I give this quiz to my couples that come in for marriage counseling or couples counseling. I give it to them in the first session to take.
It's really good to know your love languages because most of the time when a couple gets married, well, let's just face it, they usually don't have the same love language.
Now, many times they do not. Sometimes they do. I've had some that are similar, but many times they do not. And so it's really good to know what the other spouse's love language. Let's go over the 5 love languages.
So the 5 love languages are quality time, acts of service, words of affirmation, physical touch, and gifts. So here's the rub with the 5 love languages. We speak or do our own love language. That's what we typically do. We do the thing for our spouse that we usually want done to ourselves. So if physical touch is your primary love language, you're liable to be all huggy and touchy-feely with your spouse.
Yep, you're going to snuggle with them and think that's what they want, to feel loved.
Problem is, more than likely, your spouse doesn't have the same love language. So here you are, like, trying to kind of get all up on them, and who knows, maybe their love language is
acts of service, and they want the dishes washed, or they want the yard mowed, or they want their clothes washed.
Exactly. Let's apply this to Valentine's Day. What if a wife has the love language of gifts, and she would really like this beautiful bracelet that she saw in a diamond commercial. You ladies know what I'm talking about. They run these commercials this time of year, especially at Christmas too. But anyway, so it's kind of fresh in our minds this time of year. But so you have a woman here that would really like this bracelet, and maybe she's dropped some hints over the last few weeks. She's seen it on TV. And her husband on Valentine's Day goes and he mows the yard.
Right, or he plans just a trip or to spend time together. Maybe his love language is quality time, and he plans a day hike together, or and then eating afterwards, or something like, or a picnic, or something like that, which is a lot of quality time, lots of good conversation, which is really what he would like.
So, Vinny, you work a lot with couples. Let's take this example of this couple with the woman and the bracelet, or the desire for the bracelet, and the man that takes her on the day hike. What do you see as the outcome of that Valentine's Day for them? So
he would be getting what he would want, or at least feel like it, but then she would be mad during the whole hike or picnic, because it's obviously, she'll be saying to herself is, he doesn't love me. He didn't get me anything. He just wants us to go out here in the woods or outside and spend time doing what he likes to do.
Right.
He's selfish.
That leads me to the 4th mistake that leads to disappointment, and that's unclear communication. So we've taken this example of this couple using the wrong love languages with each other. The issue here is, I mentioned she was dropping hints about this bracelet. She wasn't being assertive about it. And a lot of times, this comes across maybe as fear of not, wanting to be direct, not feeling worthy enough, whatever. So this person will drop hints. In other situations, maybe not with the bracelet analogy here, but in other situations, people would be passive aggressive, dropping hints or making digs or something. If we take the example of the man that likes to mow the yard and the wife makes passive aggressive digs about, well, you were just outside all day, that kind of thing.
Well, or in front of friends, they may say, well, I wish I could get a fur coat like that, or whatever it may be. Boy, they sure have a low. He sure does really care about her. Look at the big diamond that's on her finger, or something like that.
So rather than, making these digs, being sarcastic, it's really important that if you have a thought or a feeling, that you're able to express it without aggression and without doing it in passing.
Right. So when we speak of assertive, we're talking about speaking honestly and directly, but calmly, not putting the other person down, not being mousy, but not being loud, but just like Laura and myself are talking here right now into the microphones. This is what I would call being assertive. We're calm, we're relaxed, and
casual.
We're casual, and we're saying what we want, need, and feel.
So, let's take a look at the fifth mistake that can lead to disappointment, and that is not listening.
What did you say, Laura?
He does that to me all the time, folks, every day. That's
she hates it. Okay, don't do that. It's terrible. It's not a good joke.
Two therapists and one doesn't listen. Never mind. Anyway, okay, so not listening is our fifth mistake that we're going to discuss today. Now, I do want to reference an episode that we did several months ago. It's episode number 1, where Vincent interviews Dr. David Ludwig. He created the painter-pointer typology.
Well, actually, it's the second episode. But our first episode would be good with this as well, because our first episode was about breaking down conversations.
Oh, yes.
So
thank you for correcting me on that.
Yes, the first episode would be good for this listening.
Yes, it
would.
But,
actually, the first 2 episodes, we dealt with listening. The first one, we talk about how, what behaviors that break down a conversation. And then the second episode, I interviewed Dr. David Ludwig, who came up with the communication typology called painters and pointers.
Whether you believe men and women are from different planets or not, it's indisputable that we don't always communicate clearly with one another. And one of the biggest parts of communication really isn't the speaking part. Don't get caught up in what you're going to say next. That's another thing that people struggle with, is while they're in conversation, they're not listening to what the other person's saying. They're actually thinking about what they're going to respond with.
Yeah, or they're thinking about what they're trying to get across to the other person, or they're thinking about trying to, per se, win the conversation or win the argument, and they're not actually listening to what the other person is trying to convey or express to them. And many times, they're understanding the other person wrongly. Even though they've heard it a dozen times, each of the dozen times, they hear it wrong.
So, really, listening shows your spouse that you hear them. And one of the ways that you show that you're listening is through your body language. Your body language reflects listening.
Most definitely. And that's part of the assertive, is being calm, being relaxed when the other person is talking, and making them feel relaxed. But I'll go back to, the listening part. What's interesting is I've had some couples, actually I've had numerous couples, where I have, these are highly educated people. And I do this kind of exercise, I guess, with them in session. I'll have one talk to the other, and the other one is to give them a summary. It's just reflective listening. And I find it amazing that some of these, and I'm talking about these people are, have master's degrees, very good at verbal comprehension, everything like that. However, when we do this exercise, I'll have some where the other spouse has to repeat it, 3-4 times before they can actually give a good summary. I have them say it, and so one of the spouses will say what they want to say, how they feel or whatever, for a little while, and then the other one will try to give a summary.
And they fail miserably.
And I said, nope, that's not right. Do it again. Talk again. They'll do it again. They try again, and I'll ask the other one, I said, did they give a good summary? Like, nope. All right, try again. And sometimes, I guess my point to this is many times we don't realize how poor of listeners we are. We think we're good listeners, and here's the worst thing to say. Never say to them, I understand, because that doesn't help at all.
Well, that can make somebody's skin crawl.
Well, no. Well, all it's saying is that you understand what you understand. Doesn't mean that you understand actually what they express.
It's not empathetic.
Well, yes. Well, it is what I call just telling them. If you give a summary, you're not just telling them how they feel or what they want or need, but you're actually showing them.
You're trying to put yourself in their shoes.
Yes, you're showing them that you understand what they're trying to communicate to you. So don't use I understand.
And don't use crossed arms, look away, use dismissive eye rolls. All of those are basically passive-aggressive things. And we were talking about assertiveness a little bit ago. So, if you're trying to put yourself in another person's shoes and be honest about it, your body language has to speak it.
Right. I mean, those things Laura are talking about, that body language, I would call those put-downs. Those are nonverbal put-downs.
And those may speak louder than words.
Many times they do.
Okay. With the painter-pointer episode that we were referencing just a few minutes ago, you may find that your spouse is a pointer and that you're a painter. And we're not going to go into all of the depth and detail that we went into that episode about painters and pointers, but I would say this: if your spouse is a pointer and you're a painter, it's going to be important that through your listening as the painter, that you're able to kind of put that laser focus on what the pointer is saying, because the pointer may not speak as much as you do. And so what that pointer says is kind of like, rather than speaking volumes or paragraphs long like you would, they may speak one sentence, but that sentence is concentrated goodness. You've got to focus on that sentence. You can't add your 2 cents in there and make it bigger. You've got to put focus on what that pointer's saying.
Right. So what you may need to do with them is use a statement or a paragraph, make it short and sweet. I expect for Valentine's Day us to go to a nice restaurant and you buy me either flowers or chocolate. Surprise me. That would be using the short and sweet principle for a pointer and being assertive about it.
I like that example. That's good, Vincent.
Wouldn't it be? That would be.
I think you pretty much cut to the chase there, didn't you? But you weren't aggressive about it.
No, but a pointer would understand that.
Okay, so back to this 5th mistake, which is not listening, I guess I should say. We're just basically kind of showing that person that they're heard. I realized that today's topic of what to do with disappointment in your spouse and how to fix it, I know that we only covered 5, and there's multitudes of things that couples can kind of slip up on, and we couldn't possibly cover all those in one podcast episode, but we hope that today's episode has maybe given you a little bit of direction if you're feeling a little bit lost or a little bit clumsy or awkward in your relationship, trying to kind of understand where you two are and trying to understand the root of disappointment.
Right. So thank you for listening to us today, and make sure that you go to relationshiphelpers.net. We have show notes there, and you can get a hold of our other episodes. And you also can go to our counseling website, which is ccofmooresville.com. We have many articles there and lots of resources. So make sure that you check that out, and give us some comments, give us some feedback. What would you like for us to talk about? What you enjoyed about this episode or another episode? Just let us know.
And also be sure to subscribe to Relationship Helpers if you've not done so already, because that way you can be kept up to date with our weekly podcast episodes. Each week we're coming out with something new, and we want to be able to get it to you. Until next time, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for listening. Goodbye.
Note that accuracy and authority in regards to the subject matter covered today is not a replacement for professional care. Neither the host, the clinicians, or the guests are rendering clinical or other professional advice. Seek professional help if you need it.